Mexico's cartel crisis is not just a crime problem. It's a national security disaster. As of 2024, cartels effectively control 30 to 40% of Mexico's territory, with some regions operating completely outside the government's influence. And the violence is staggering. Over 30,000 murders per year since 2017, and over 110,000 people officially reported as missing. Many more are likely to be buried in mass graves. Drug trafficking, human smuggling, extortion, and cartel wars have turned Mexico into one of the most dangerous countries in the world. But how did we get here? And what does the future hold? In the 1980s and 1990s, the drug trade in the Americas was dominated by Colombian cartels, especially the Medellin and Cali cartels. These organizations were masters at producing and trafficking cocaine, smuggling it into the United States via Caribbean routes. But then, everything started to change. In 1993, the death of Pablo Escobar marked a significant blow to the Medellin cartel, and U.S. law enforcement increasingly pressured drug traffickers with naval patrols. As it became harder to move cocaine through the Caribbean, Colombian cartels sought new ways to move their product, and Mexico's land routes became the new pathway. Initially, Mexican cartels were just transporters, but as they handled more of the cocaine, they started to take control of the entire operation, from production to distribution. This shift in power marked the beginning of Mexico's rise as the dominant player in the drug trade. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Mexican cartels were no longer just middlemen. They had grown into global criminal empires, controlling not just drug trafficking, but also human smuggling, extortion, and arms dealing. One of the biggest names in this new era of Mexican cartels is the Sinaloa cartel, which was led by the notorious Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Under his leadership, Sinaloa became the world's most powerful drug trafficking organization. It wasn't just about cocaine anymore. Sinaloa specialized in heroin, methamphetamine, and fentanyl, with operations spanning over 40 countries. Even though El Chapo was caught and sent to the US, his cartel is still a major force, thanks in part to his sons, who are continuing the family business. Sinaloa has been crucial in flooding the US with fentanyl, a synthetic opioid which is 50 times stronger than heroin. Their extensive use of tunnels under the US-Mexico border, their influence over law enforcement, and their ability to adapt have kept them at the top of the game. Then, there's the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG, which has been rising rapidly in the past decade. It's known for its extreme violence and ruthless tactics. CJNG's military-style operations, including ambushes, executions, and the use of high-powered weapons, have made it one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the world. This cartel has taken over fentanyl production, which is responsible for a staggering number of deaths in the US, between 70 and 80,000 deaths linked to this drug alone. CJNG's brutal methods are part of its identity, and they've earned a reputation for terrorizing not only rival cartels, but entire communities as well. The cartel has grown so powerful that it has been labeled one of the most significant threats to both Mexico and the US by authorities. Another significant player is the Gulf Cartel, one of Mexico's oldest and most established organizations. The Gulf Cartel once controlled vital trafficking routes that moved drugs from Colombia through Mexico and into the US. Today, though, it's involved more in human trafficking, extortion, and other illegal activities, especially along the US-Mexico border. While it has lost much of its former power to newer and more violent cartels like the CJNG and Sinaloa, the Gulf Cartel remains a force to be reckoned with. Internal rifts and law enforcement pressure have forced the Gulf Cartel to change tactics, but it still holds significant sway in certain regions. Then there's Los Zetas, originally created as the Gulf Cartel's military wing. Over time, they broke off and became infamous for their sheer brutality. Mass killings, beheadings, and terrifying acts of violence became their trademark. The Zetas were once feared for their highly organized and efficient use of military tactics, making them one of the most formidable cartels in Mexico's history. However, like many of the older cartels, Los Zetas eventually suffered from internal fragmentation and crackdowns by authorities. Despite their decline, remnants of the Zetas continue to operate, often engaging in extortion, kidnapping, and other forms of violent crime. In Michoacán, two other groups, La Familia Michoacana and Los Viagras, have carved out their own territories. La Familia Michoacana initially presented itself as a group with a pseudo-religious ideology, claiming to protect local communities, but they quickly became known for violence. Los Viagras emerged as a rival group, often clashing with the Sinaloa Cartel and CJNG over control of the region. Both of these groups are heavily involved in the production of synthetic drugs like methamphetamine, and are known for their involvement in extortion, kidnapping, and brutal tactics to maintain control over their territories. The rise of these cartels has had devastating effects on both Mexico and the United States. In Mexico, drug cartel violence has escalated to unimaginable levels, with over 400,000 people killed since the government began cracking down on organized crime in 2006. Entire communities have been torn apart, and many civilians have found themselves caught in the crossfire of cartel wars. Cities and towns are controlled by these powerful groups, and law enforcement is often overwhelmed by their sheer numbers and resources. In the US, the opioid crisis has only been worsened by the influx of fentanyl into the market. The resulting overdose deaths have skyrocketed, and fentanyl is now a leading cause of death for Americans under the age of 50. These cartels, with their vast operations, have contributed significantly to this public health emergency. The power shift from Colombian cartels to Mexican organizations has fundamentally altered the drug trade. Colombian cartels may have been the kings of cocaine trafficking, but Mexican cartels have built their empire not only by taking over the cocaine trade, but also by expanding into synthetic drugs like fentanyl and methamphetamine. They've adapted, evolved, and become multifaceted criminal organizations. Despite ongoing efforts to combat them, these cartels continue to thrive. As the situation in both Mexico and the US grows more dire, one thing is clear: the fight against these cartels is far from over. In Mexico, cartels aren't just groups of drug traffickers. They operate more like shadow governments. Each cartel rules over specific territories with a level of control and influence that can rival the state itself. These criminal empires have divided the country into regions where they specialize in everything from drug production to extortion, human trafficking, and even fuel theft. The Sinaloa Cartel is one of the most powerful and well-known organizations in the world, and its reach stretches across Mexico and beyond. Based primarily in the region of Sinaloa, the cartel controls crucial drug trafficking routes, especially those used to transport cocaine and fentanyl into the US. For Sinaloa, the drug trade is a global enterprise. They have extensive global networks, and their ability to navigate complex smuggling routes has kept them as one of the top players in the world of cartels. In the western state of Jalisco, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG, reigns supreme. This cartel is notorious for its violent tactics, including direct confrontations with the Mexican government. CJNG has rapidly grown into one of the most dangerous and influential cartels in the country. While they are involved in various illegal activities, their primary source of income comes from the production of methamphetamine. Jalisco has become the epicenter of meth production in Mexico, and CJNG's operations span across vast areas of the state, where they control both production and distribution. The cartel's violent nature is not just limited to rival cartels. They've targeted law enforcement and government officials with brutal efficiency, often using military-style operations to assert dominance. Heading east, Tamaulipas is a battleground for control between the Gulf Cartel and the remnants of the Zetas. While these groups are no longer as dominant as they once were, they still control major smuggling routes and illegal enterprises. Tamaulipas is known for its involvement in human trafficking and fuel theft. These cartels often exploit the porous border regions to smuggle people into the US, and they've made billions from illegal fuel siphoning operations. The Gulf Cartel's control over this region is aided by its access to critical infrastructure, such as pipelines and distribution networks. Meanwhile, the Zetas, who were originally a paramilitary group formed by defected Mexican special forces, continue to use brutal violence to maintain control over this region. In Michoacán, a region rich with agricultural resources, several cartels compete for dominance. But the CJNG, Los Viagras, and La Familia Michoacana are the main players. While these groups engage in a variety of criminal activities, one of their most lucrative operations is extorting local avocado and lime farmers. These crops are essential to the economy of the region, and the cartels have been known to demand protection money from farmers, often using violent means to enforce their demands. In addition to extortion, these groups are heavily involved in the production of methamphetamine, with many of the rural areas of Michoacán serving as clandestine labs for the drug. The violence and extortion that plague the region have made life increasingly difficult for local residents, who often find themselves caught in the crossfire between competing cartels. In Guerrero, the situation is equally grim. This state is known for its heroin production, and several cartels, including the Guerreros Unidos, a splinter group of the Beltrán Leyva organization, fight for control over this lucrative industry. Guerrero is one of the key regions in Mexico for the cultivation of poppy plants, which are then processed into heroin. These cartels control not just the production, but also the trafficking of the drug, which is smuggled into the US and other markets. The heroin trade in Guerrero is so dominant that it's become a major source of income for many of the criminal groups in the area, who use their power to enforce their rule over local communities. The violence associated with the heroin trade has led to constant conflict, with rival cartels fighting for control of poppy-growing regions and trafficking routes. Each of these regions operates almost like its own country, where the cartels function as shadow governments. They tax local businesses, enforce their own laws, and even resolve disputes within their communities. For example, if a local shopkeeper refuses to pay the cartel's protection money, the consequences can be deadly. Cartels have their own enforcement mechanisms, often using violence to maintain control and keep civilians in line. Whether it's through kidnapping, beheading, or mass killings, the cartel's methods are both brutal and effective. In some areas, cartel members act as the de facto authorities, offering protection in exchange for loyalty and money, while punishing anyone who dares to cross them. The power these cartels wield over their territories is a direct challenge to the Mexican state, which has struggled to regain control in areas dominated by criminal organizations. The cartels are well equipped, often better armed and better funded than local law enforcement. They also have a vast network of corrupt officials on their payroll, which makes it even harder for the government to clamp down on their operations. In this world, cartels are not just criminals. They are rulers of their domains. They define what happens within their territories, and their influence extends far beyond the drug trade. From extorting farmers to running human trafficking operations, the power these cartels hold is absolute. For many Mexicans living in these areas, life under cartel control has become a harsh reality, with little hope for change unless the Mexican government can mount a serious challenge to these criminal empires. In many parts of Mexico where the government has struggled to maintain control, cartels have stepped in, filling the vacuum and taking on the role of shadow governments. These criminal organizations aren't just about drugs and violence. They manage entire communities, providing services, enforcing laws, and even controlling local economies. However, while it might seem like cartels are stepping up where the state has failed, life under their rule is far from benevolent. It is a nightmare of fear, coercion, and brutality. One of the most insidious ways cartels maintain control is through extortion, demanding piso, or protection money, from anyone trying to operate a business. This practice isn't just limited to major corporations. Street vendors, small farmers, and even local shops are forced to pay up. In the state of Michoacán, for example, the avocado farmers must hand over up to $1,000 per hectare each year. If they fail to comply, the consequences can be fatal. The cartels have a simple yet brutal message: pay the tax or face retribution. In regions where these cartels have established dominance, many residents are left with little choice but to comply with the cartel's demands for fear of their lives or their family's safety. However, it's not all just extortion and intimidation. Cartels, particularly the powerful ones like the Sinaloa cartel and the CJNG, know that winning over local populations is key to maintaining their grip on power. So, to do so, they sometimes take on the role of benefactors, funding social services in an effort to secure loyalty and solidify their hold. During the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, both the CJNG and the Sinaloa cartel distributed aid packages to struggling communities, providing food and supplies to those in desperate need. At first glance, it might appear that these cartels are acting out of kindness or civic duty, but this benevolence is strategic. The goal is to buy loyalty and, more importantly, ensure that the people in these areas see the cartels as protectors, not just criminals. This tactic builds a kind of dependency, where the local population feels they owe their survival to the cartels, making them less likely to resist or challenge their authority. But for those who don't comply with cartel rule, the punishment can be swift and horrific. Cartels enforce their authority with ruthless brutality, using public executions and gruesome displays of violence to send messages to anyone thinking about stepping out of line. In some cases, victims have been beheaded or subjected to acid baths, methods intended not just to kill, but to instill fear in the community. Whether it's an informant, a rival gang member, or even an innocent civilian caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, no one is safe from the brutal punishments cartels mete out. The violence is often public, meant to send a chilling message that any attempt to defy the cartel's laws will be met with the same fate. Perhaps one of the most chilling aspects of cartel control is their ability to recruit children into their armies. In some regions, children as young as 10 are forcibly recruited, trained to serve as foot soldiers in the cartel's operations. These young recruits are often coerced or threatened into joining, and those who refuse are subjected to horrendous consequences. Torture or death is a common punishment for those who try to escape or resist cartel influence. For these children, the choice is simple: join the cartel or face a gruesome fate. Many are forced into violent activities, such as running drugs, carrying out hits, or working as lookouts. The cartels prey on vulnerable youth, offering them protection and a sense of belonging, while at the same time turning them into instruments of violence and terror. Under cartel rule, life becomes a daily struggle for survival. People who live in these territories often face an impossible choice: comply or be punished. The cartels, in many ways, create a system where they are both the oppressors and the providers, making it nearly impossible for residents to break free from their control. The fear of violence, the threat of death, and the constant extortion leave people with little hope of escape. The government's inability or unwillingness to challenge these cartels only strengthens their grip on power, and the cycle of violence continues unabated. Mexican cartels have evolved far beyond the stereotypical image of street gangs. They now operate as powerful paramilitary forces, complete with armored convoys, drones, and rocket launchers. These organizations are no longer just trafficking drugs. They're waging full-scale wars, often leaving destruction and chaos in their wake. One of the bloodiest and most dangerous rivalries today is the ongoing conflict between the CJNG and the Sinaloa cartel, a battle that has torn through entire regions, leaving countless lives lost. Thousands die every year as these two cartels vie for dominance in the drug trade, territory, and influence. While the battle rages on across the country, states like Michoacán and Zacatecas have become ground zero for cartel violence. Entire towns and villages have been depopulated as families flee in fear of being caught in the crossfire between warring cartels. The violence is often indiscriminate, targeting anyone and everyone who stands in the way of these criminal empires. Innocent civilians, police officers, and even local politicians are frequently caught in the escalating violence, making it clear that the cartels no longer just control illegal trade, they control entire communities. What makes this war so deadly is the military-grade tactics both cartels now employ. Gone are the days when cartels relied solely on street-level operations or corrupt officials to carry out their work. These cartels have become sophisticated and heavily armed, adopting the same kinds of weapons and strategies you'd expect from a national army. One of the most terrifying elements of cartel warfare is the use of armored vehicles, known in English as narco tanks or monstruos in Spanish. These are homemade tanks, trucks that have been reinforced with thick layers of steel, often outfitted with machine guns and, in some cases, rocket-propelled grenades. These vehicles make it possible for cartels to storm towns, ambush rivals, and resist military or police intervention with ease. CJNG in particular has taken cartel warfare to new heights with the use of drones. These unmanned aerial vehicles are used to drop explosives onto rival groups, turning the skies into a battlefield. The use of drones is not only a terrifying tactic, but also a sign of the cartel's growing technological prowess. With drones, the CJNG can monitor enemy movements, target specific individuals, and even launch attacks from above, all while avoiding direct confrontation. The ability to conduct warfare from the air gives them a strategic advantage, and it's a tool that the Sinaloa cartel and other groups are quickly trying to adopt as well. The introduction of drones into the cartel war highlights just how far these organizations have come in their evolution from simple drug runners to full-fledged militarized forces. Cartels now have access to military-grade weaponry, advanced technology, and a growing number of recruits eager to join the fight. These recruits are often drawn into cartel armies with the promise of money, power, and protection. In areas where the government has little to no presence, the cartels become the de facto authorities, offering a sense of control and structure in an otherwise chaotic world. But this power comes at a steep price, with those who refuse to cooperate often subjected to brutal punishment or death. In the midst of this war, the lines between criminal gangs and legitimate military forces blur. Cartels operate as if they're armies of their own, with their own codes of conduct, rankings, and strategic operations. They build alliances with other cartels, wage territorial battles, and use their influence to sway local governments and law enforcement. For the people living in these areas, the government's inability to maintain order only strengthens the cartel's hold. In some ways, the cartels are beginning to mirror the military forces of a rogue state. They have the manpower, the weaponry, and the will to fight against any opposition, including the Mexican government. As the CJNG and Sinaloa cartel continue to grow in power and influence, it's clear that their war is far from over. Their ability to terrorize entire regions and destabilize the country presents a formidable challenge for Mexico, which struggles to contain this growing paramilitary threat. The consequences of this cartel war are far-reaching. While the cartels continue to expand their power and influence, entire communities suffer. In the battle for control over Mexico's criminal empires, the stakes are high, and the war is only getting fiercer. Mexico's battle with powerful drug cartels has been raging for decades, yet the country seems stuck in a never-ending cycle of violence and corruption. Despite numerous efforts from the government and international partners, these criminal organizations continue to grow stronger, leaving communities in terror. The question on everyone's mind is, why hasn't the government been able to stop them? The answer lies in a combination of systematic corruption, failed strategies, and external forces that contribute to the cartel's unchecked power. One of the most significant hurdles in combating cartels is the deep-rooted corruption within Mexican law enforcement. A report from 2020 revealed that over 60% of local police forces are infiltrated by cartel members. In some smaller towns, the situation is even worse. Entire police departments have been compromised, with officers resigning out of fear of cartel retribution or being paid off to turn a blind eye. This means that in many cases, the people who are supposed to protect and serve are working directly for the very organizations terrorizing the population. Cartels have used bribery and intimidation to ensure the loyalty of local police and military forces, making it difficult to build an effective resistance. Even when authorities attempt to take action against cartel members, these infiltrations often result in leaks or sabotage. Without a trustworthy law enforcement system, fighting cartels becomes like trying to fight a fire while the fire department is on the other side of the flames. The Mexican government has long relied on a strategy known as the Kingpin strategy, which involves arresting or killing the leaders of cartels. The theory is that by removing a cartel's head, the organization will crumble. This strategy has led to the capture or death of notorious cartel leaders like Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, But the results have been far from successful. In fact, the opposite has happened. Cartel violence has escalated, and the power vacuum left by these leaders has allowed for fierce infighting between factions. When leaders like El Chapo are removed, other cartel members scramble to claim their spot at the top. This infighting often results in brutal turf wars, increasing the bloodshed and destabilizing entire regions. It's become clear that the removal of individual leaders doesn't address the root cause of cartel power. It only disrupts the status quo temporarily while allowing new, equally dangerous figures to rise. The Kingpin strategy may make for a dramatic headline, but it hasn't been a sustainable solution for halting the cartels. The United States has spent billions of dollars trying to curb the flow of illegal drugs like cocaine and fentanyl from Mexico. Despite these efforts, fentanyl production in Mexico continues to skyrocket, and cartels have adapted quickly to shifting drug trends. In 2023, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA, seized over 379 million deadly doses of fentanyl. Yet, the demand for the drug remains high, and the cartels continue to operate with impunity. The DEA's efforts have been focused on cutting off drug shipments at the border and dismantling cartel operations, but these measurements often feel like putting a band-aid on a much larger problem. While billions are funneled into these initiatives, the cartels remain one step ahead, finding new ways to produce and smuggle drugs into the US. The cyclical nature of the drug trade makes it difficult to break the supply chain. New players quickly step in to replace the old ones, and the violence continues to escalate. The human cost of Mexico's drug war is staggering. Over 500 mass graves have been discovered across the country, offering a chilling reminder of the brutality with which cartels deal with those who cross them. The violence has also taken a toll on journalists. At least 150 journalists have been murdered in Mexico since 2000, many of them targeted for investigating or reporting on cartel activity. These killings send a clear message to the media and the public. Speak out against the cartels, and you could be next. Politicians have also been assassinated with alarming regularity, particularly during election seasons, as cartels attempt to control local governments and influence policy. As the violence escalates and the cartel's reach grows, some experts fear that Mexico is on the brink of becoming a failed state, a country where the government's power is largely symbolic and cartels have complete control. If the current trend continues, cartels could take full control of key industries, such as drug production, human trafficking, and even legal enterprises. They could eventually have a stranglehold on politics, dictating who gets elected and controlling policy decisions at every level of government. The possibility of a narco state is a terrifying one, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Mexico's government is struggling to keep up with the scale and complexity of the cartels, and the influence of organized crime has become deeply embedded in society. This situation has left many wondering whether the country can ever reclaim its sovereignty or if the cartels will become the true power brokers in Mexico. So, what can be done to stop the cartels and reclaim control? Some experts argue that Mexico's focus should shift to eradicating corruption within law enforcement. Without cleaning up the police force and ensuring that cartel members can't infiltrate key institutions, any anti-cartel strategy is doomed to fail. Efforts to eliminate cartel influence within government and security agencies are critical to dismantling the cartel's infrastructure. Others argue that legalizing drugs could reduce cartel profits by eliminating the illicit market. While this approach remains controversial, some believe that by decriminalizing drugs like fentanyl, governments could deprive cartels of their primary revenue stream, ultimately weakening their power. Another proposed solution is increased U.S. military involvement. Some politicians suggest labeling cartels as terrorist organizations, allowing for direct military action against them. While this would escalate the conflict and further involve the U.S. in Mexico's affairs, it could also provide the Mexican government with additional resources and support in the fight against the cartels. Mexico's cartel crisis is one of the world's worst security disasters. With cartels controlling vast territories, running parallel governments, and committing mass murder, the country is at a crossroads. Without decisive action, Mexico risks descending further into lawlessness, with the possibility of an entire narco state emerging in the near future. Regardless, the question remains: can Mexico reclaim its land, or has the cartel empire already won? Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. Really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MatPack.